Hello and welcome to the Beacon Election Night broadcast. Thank you for joining us. Beacon is a project of the Maine People's Alliance, and I'm here with my regular podcast co-hosts, MPA statewide organizer Esther Pugh and MPA Deputy Director Ben Chin.
Hey,
Yeah,
people will
hello.
find out. People will find out if we have faces for radio or not today. So, looking forward to figuring that out.
So it's great to see you both live and in color. How are you feeling?
Yeah, how am I feeling? That's a good question.
What are you drinking? Maybe that's the better question.
I'm drinking water. I mean, I had my energy drink, about an hour ago to pump myself up
Oh no.
for this and to keep myself awake. So we'll see when that kicks in, when I start talking a million miles a minute. But water for now.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was really relieved already by the fact that there has not been the worst fears realized that many of us had of violence at the polls that could have really deterred folks from voting. I think every hour that goes by where we're not seeing that is really good news, both for a lot of progressive candidates out there and the state of democracy in America.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the stakes. Democracy hangs in the balance here, and Mainers have some of the most important races in the nation right here in the Pine Tree State. So we'll be tracking some of those over the evening here. We've got the U.S. Senate race, which is obviously pivotal for control of that body. There's the second congressional district, which can you imagine if the presidential race came down to one electoral vote in Maine in ranked choice voting. And then there's another couple of bodies that I think probably don't get enough attention that we're going to spend some time talking about tonight, the State House and State Senate. Every seat in both of those bodies is up for grabs here. They're 2-year terms, and there could be big changes in what's possible in Maine going forward based on those results.
That's right. And we'll get into this with some of our guests tonight. But for folks who aren't familiar with the state budget process, typically in Maine, it requires actually 2/3 of both the Maine House and the Maine Senate to approve a budget. And so that means it isn't enough for Democrats and progressives just to have a majority to really control the core of the policymaking process. They've got how large that majority is and whether or not they have to bring Republicans along to pass policy is going to be determined in large part by the margins that we see tonight. And of course, as you're indicating, Mike, anything can happen. We've certainly seen both of those bodies go ways that we were not expecting in past cycles. So don't want to take anything for granted.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're talking about 2/3. That's more optimistic than I can ever hope to be here.
So we'll see. I'm excited to talk it through with you guys and to see what happens over the next few hours.
Absolutely. In addition to those races, which you can see down below us here on the Chiron, we're going to keep those updated, the State House and State Senate on the right there. There's also another race that happens every election cycle. Perhaps doesn't get quite as much attention, but there's a lot of journalists that for them this is their Super Bowl, and they want to have the best reporting of what's happening on election day, on election night, be the first to call races, have the most accurate results. And so they work really hard on that, and it's more difficult in Maine than in other places because unlike a lot of states where the elections are done by the county or sometimes reported district or statewide, these are done in Maine by town. And there are, more than 400 towns in Maine that are all reporting their results individually. And they have to go to every single town clerk from one end of the state to the other, try and get those unofficial results and post them up on their website and announce them on the air or in the newspaper. And so we're going to be looking, the BDN has done a very good job of that in past years, the Bangor Daily News, the Press Herald. They've been a challenger, strong contender. Then there's the Associated Press as well, and they feed a lot of newspapers across the country. The New York Times and others have their results posted there, all trying to get those results from town clerks in Maine. So we'll try and track what those numbers look like as well. And you can see some of those have started to filter in below already here.
Mike, was that whole setup just so that you could use the word Chiron a couple of times, calling attention to the great Chirons that you have in fact created for us tonight?
I think that is the first word in the Beacon election night drinking game. If we say Chiron, be on the lookout for it.
You went drinking game. You went drinking game, and I was like, who has a bingo sheet of what we'll say today or not? Will someone say malarkey? Well, I just said it, so...
Well, and the other thing I'll be watching for tonight is there are some local races that are happening, actually local referenda, I should say, that are really interesting. The city of Portland, largest city in Maine, is going to be weighing in on a $15 minimum wage and a Green New Deal and a ban on unwanted facial surveillance. So there's a lot of interesting issues that we'll see both sort of previewed in the candidate results, but also directly in terms of what those local referenda will say.
Yeah, in Rockland, there's a minimum wage referendum. So we usually on the podcast end with something we call a ray of hope. We started it just after November 4 years ago, I think, for some reason. Really wanted to end on an upbeat tone on everything we did and really, talk about a better future and things that were putting some wind in our sails. But I kind of wanted to reverse things tonight and start with a ray of hope. And I have just been amazed by all the work that Esther has done and all of the volunteers that she's been working with. And I think you have a bit of a slideshow here.
I do, yeah, and I would like to say it's not just me; it's the entire organizing team
Mostly
at MPA.
No, it's a lot of people.
But I mean, I'll take no. Yeah, we have a bit of a slideshow, and then I also want to just talk a little bit about what the organizing team did over the past few weeks and past few months, building up until today. So organizing, usually a very much in-person job. Usually we're meeting folks, grabbing coffee, we're knocking doors, we're talking to folks at all the summer events that are happening. But with
I'll start
COVID,
the slideshow. People can see a bit of that.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah, please start the slideshow of everything that we've been doing. But obviously with COVID, we weren't able to do a lot of that in-person work. And so we had to change the way we were thinking about organizing. And you can see from some of these pictures, a lot of stuff happening in homes where people are living together, doing phone banking, people who are socially distanced, wearing masks, doing text banking. We did a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of virtual trainings by and for our members. And we organized and participated in safely distanced car rallies outside of Senator Collins' offices across the state, calling attention to her voting record on issues like healthcare, taxes, and a lot more issues like that. Like I said, usually during an election season, we would be knocking on doors and talking to voters face to face, with a lot less focused on phone banking and text banking. But we had to adapt. And one of the first things that we did was we worked on expanding our organizing team. And we hired a bunch of part-time organizing fellows, and alongside of our intern team and many volunteers, we started doing weekly phone banks to voters in the state and weekly text banks. We did a lot of fun stuff in that we did. We listened to music, we played games, we played trivia, we played bingo. We got to know one another. And I feel like I know everyone who I've never even met them in person. I feel like I learned a lot about folks on this time together. And you can see the energy in these pictures when we're able to be together in these safe, distanced ways. People are so happy to be there. But one of my favorite stories from one of these text banks was when one of our interns texted somebody and asked them to join us to volunteer. And he signed up right then that night and actually jumped on our Zoom meeting as it was happening in the moment, hoping to reach out and text some voters right then. That rarely happens. And that made me so much more motivated to do something more. And so you can see lots of different pictures of Zoom meetings and trainings happening. We also partnered with Planned Parenthood Votes and NextGen with Maine Student Action on a virtual event that was held around the anniversary of Collins announcing her support for Kavanaugh. And folks shared their stories in this virtual event on why we need to replace Collins at the Senate. And we'll be hearing from one of them later, which is pretty awesome. And they're hearing their story that they shared. And then as we came into GOTV weekend, we did some in-person activities, which you've seen some photos of, dropping reminders to vote at folks' homes, but also continuing to do our phone banks and text banks. And tonight, you might have seen some of our volunteers and members at the polls, welcoming folks as they waited in lines, passing out snacks, I heard some hot chocolate was being passed out because it was very cold tonight. And a lot of these pictures on this slideshow are from these past few days, because who wants to really look at more pictures of people having Zoom meetings? I've seen enough of myself in a little square.
There were a lot more Zoom meetings on here. I have to admit, I did cut a few.
Yeah, we had a lot of Zoom meetings, multiple a week. I'm very used to looking at myself in a little tiny rectangle now. But all in all, with COVID and all the expectations we had for this year, I'm extremely proud of the organizing team and the work that we've been doing, talking to voters all across the state. And I am so excited about everything that we've built and am excited to see what happens tonight and where we move from there, from now on. So that's my little bit of a thing from the organizing side that I got to participate in.
Yeah, Esther, I think it's amazing to see all the work that so many folks have been pulling together. I got to go out a little bit with the Lewiston crew earlier today, knocking on doors. And I think one of the things that I'm really trying to keep in my head and heart tonight, that I feel like anybody who has volunteered on this election, particularly with the teams that you've been working on, knows, is that this isn't about winning and losing in the terms that people think about, like sports or some of the other political punditry that might be out right now. This is about the lives of real people. And I know that when I was dropping lid in Lewiston and one of the harder hit economically streets downtown, there were 4 or 5 buildings I went to where the tenants had just been notified that day that even though they had paid their rent, their landlord didn't pay their sewage and water bills, and they were about to have their plumbing cut off. So we don't think about those things as political decisions, but that's absolutely about the economy that we have today and who has power and who doesn't, and voting is how we change all of that. And I think for folks who have gotten their hands dirty this election on the kind of activities and programs you guys have been working on, that's never lost. And it's been really inspiring to see people carry that torch.
Yeah, thanks.
So on that note, I think there's a lot of folks that have done a lot of work, a ton of allies at organizations across the state, some of whom we'll be hearing from tonight. Just regular people getting involved at a level I've never seen before and under just incredible circumstances. I saw MPA volunteers posting selfies at 5 a.m. this morning as they were doing their last lit drops, just trying to squeeze out every vote. It was amazing. I've also been really proud of a lot of the other people on our teams here at MPA that have been doing other work. One group that I'm particularly proud of are the reporters and the editor at Beacon, who have just done a great job holding a lot of candidates accountable right during this election and making sure that the issues that everyone that's a member of MPA cares about are heard more publicly. And so with that, I actually do want to invite Alice McFadden on. She's a reporter for Beacon, and she's going to join us on Zoom, assuming her video is working here.
I will just say also, I was really impressed with the folks especially in like the Bangor area where it was snowing, who went out and dropped lit this morning, because I'm not ready for snow. So good for you all for being out there.
And there's Alice. Hi.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you. And
Okay, great.
we want to talk about a couple of different pieces that you've written that I have just found incredibly useful in putting this election into some context. Do you want to talk about the state House and Senate or the U.S. Senate first? Up to you.
Let's just jump right in and go right to the U.S. Senate.
All right. Here is an article that Alice wrote recently. The headline is Collins denies systemic racism exists in Maine despite broad evidence. So I think this was a bit of a shocking thing that she said at a debate recently. And it's been picked up all over the country now. A lot of national outlets have noted it. But you were the first one to write about it. What happened here, and what were you thinking it was important to report on?
Yeah, so this was in the final debate, and Susan Collins just said verbatim in response to an outright question from the moderator that systemic racism is not a problem in Maine. And this quote, Mike, as you said, did sort of make the rounds online nationally. CNN wrote about it, and AOC actually tweeted about it.
I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it got like a ton of shares. Yeah, that was pretty. Wish it was the Beacon article, but you know what you gonna do. But something that we highlighted that CNN didn't mention was exactly how demonstrably untrue what Collins said really is. Because according to U.S. Census data, 1 out of every 2 Black Mainers lives in poverty. Compared with 27.6% nationally. And for Indigenous people in Maine, the poverty rate is 1 out of 3. So it just, to claim that systemic racism isn't a problem in Maine just feels so out of touch with the times and with reality, honestly.
I feel like this is particularly atrocious with the racial disparities we've seen with COVID so far this year, and having some of the worst racial COVID disparities in the country. I mean, right in the middle of in the pandemic. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the best analogy would be for somebody who's at the epicenter of something, denying that, you know, it even exists. But it's really, it's irresponsible. It's the opposite of what we'd want a senator to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I watched that debate, and I'm pretty sure I was really close to throwing something across my apartment when I heard her say that. And probably all my neighbors heard me screaming too, because I was like, what? And that was a really good article that you wrote, Alice. And because that's something that needs to be lifted up, because that's just like the stats are right there showing that systemic racism is very much real and that people are being impacted at disproportionate levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it should too. Kind of the importance of the work that you've been doing during this election, reporting on these issues that, yes, they got national coverage eventually after we wrote about them, but no one else in Maine had a headline like this, you know, picking out that part of the debate. It was all in, you know, paragraph 20 of some omnibus about everything they said in the debate. And really showing these candidates the important stances they take on the most important issues facing our country and our state. You know, that's something that I think we've done really well, from tracking racism in this race in a bunch of different ways, including the funding of like QAnon candidates for state senate, which is, I never thought we'd be having that conversation, to the pharmaceutical corporations that have been funding Collins and Big Oil and things like that. A lot of that has been only found on Beacon, which has been pretty cool. Let's talk actually about following the money in a different way. You also reported on kind of would you say the remnants of the anti-vaccine campaign that started with the referendum last year? Or I guess that was this year. I can't believe this is all 2020.
I know.
Oh, God.
But that's enough setup. I'll put up the article. You tell us what this is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are these 2 really interesting and very well organized coalitions on either side of the vaccine debate that have been sort of both candidates running for state legislature and people like super PACs rather funding those candidates. And you might have thought that this whole vaccine issue would have died after the measure 1 was settled in the spring, but alas, no.
After they got 27% of the vote.
Yeah, you would think that would have sent a message, but no. So in Auburn, Democratic incumbent Betty Ann Sheets is facing down a very well-funded challenge from Laurel Libby, who's kind of a anti-vaxxer in disguise. Libby was one of the leading voices in the Yes on One anti-vaccination campaign, but sort of dropped that rhetoric post spring election, and has been styling herself more as a suburban mom with a libertarian bent. And there's also this anti-vaccination PAC that was formed to fight Question One, but has spent $500,000 this election cycle to help a slate of committed anti-vaccination candidates across the state. And a lot of these candidates are also, incidentally, very skeptical of mask wearing and some of the COVID precautions that are coming out of Governor Janet Mills's office. So pretty ominous stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and $500,000, that's a lot in those kind of contests.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's interesting that a lot of these candidates have been, they were active in the campaign. It was all over social media for a while, but they seem to have been trying to cut those ties publicly. I'm really glad that you were able to report and show where this money was coming from and where those connections were and what their kind of true agenda is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your work on all of that, Alice. And I think I'm still stuck on the fact that March was only in March was when we voted on that. And I had been at the polls that day. I remember talking to folks when that was being voted on, and people were talking about COVID. So it's all coming back around. And so it's really important that issue, we got to remember it wasn't actually that long ago, even though it feels like a lot has happened between now and then, but really important to remember that where that money is coming from and who it's going to.
Yeah. And even, now more than ever, COVID, public health is a topic that we should all have very keenly on our minds.
All right, Alice, thank you for that. And we're now going to talk to another Beacon reporter. This is Evan Popp. He's going to get on and talk about a couple of local races that he has also been reporting on.
Cool.
So I think you all can tell this is somewhere between a public access show and a very amateur Twitch stream. That's the vibe that we're going for here, and I want to make sure we maintain that throughout the broadcast. But here's Can
you guys hear me?
We can. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Great. I've been talking. Ben, you take it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all doing well, Evan. You're on to talk about some local races. So why don't you walk us through what you're seeing on the ground?
Sure. So I guess kind of two races that I'd like to talk about. Let's start with the Senate District 13 race, which is between Chloe Maxman, who's a Democratic state rep, and the Republican incumbent Dana Dow, who's the Senate Minority Leader. And this is a notable race for a couple of reasons. One, Dow is the leader of the Republican Party for the state Senate, and it's also likely to be pretty close. He only won re-election in 2018 by 2 percentage points. But another reason we wrote about this race is that there was this kind of pretty bizarre poll that happened earlier in, I think, September or October, where it was essentially somewhat of a push-pull type thing where this kind of shadowy outside group asked questions that were clearly biased against Maxman and in favor of Dow. And it was later revealed that the main Senate Republican campaign arm was the one who funded this. And this is notable in another way because Maxman has kind of made a note of running a 100% positive campaign. And so there's this that happened, and there's also been all kinds of mailers and videos attacking her that the Republican Party has sent out in that district. So definitely a race that has that Republicans are focused on and that Democrats would love to win.
I know of all the state House and Senate races, this is I'm interested in all of them, but I think this one is probably the one that I'm most closely tracking, just because Representative Maxman has been a huge champion on so many issues. The one we worked most closely with her on this last year was around making sure that seniors can actually access transportation so that they can get to the doctor and get groceries and meet all these other basic needs. And it's not the sexiest of issues, but if you live in rural Maine, transportation is a big deal, particularly when you're elderly, particularly when it's the difference between you being able to live and age in your home or not. And she's just such a rare combination of great values and very strategic and hardworking. It's such a shame to see folks like Dana Dow and his backers on the conservative side stooping to these kind of tactics that you were reporting on locally.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll just add to that, she's also been very focused on environmental issues and on broadband access, which is also a huge issue in rural Maine.
Especially now when you think about everyone working from home. And like just thinking about broadband access, I'm here in Portland. I've had issues with my internet all day today, which is not great when you are about to do a 2-hour live broadcast. So that's definitely a race that I'll be watching very closely alongside everyone else.
Absolutely. Sure. So this is House District 99, which includes some towns in Waldo County. And April Turner is a Democrat there who's running against the Republican incumbent, Mary Ann Kinney. And a couple of things that stuck out to us about April Turner. She has a very different background than a lot of other people in the legislature. She comes from a background of being born into poverty. Both her and her husband lost their jobs during the Great Recession. At one point, she was working 4 jobs to get by while also putting herself through school to be a social worker. And she has this great quote about what she would do if she was elected. She would want to be a voice for low-income people in Augusta. And she said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so for folks that are in poverty, we need to be represented. And it just felt like that she would bring a really necessary perspective in a legislature that does feature a lot of people who come from a legal background, from a more privileged background. And this is also a race that will probably be pretty close. She's run against Kinney twice before, and she lost in 2018 by less than 200 votes. So this is shaping up to be a pretty close race. Kinney has a fairly anti-worker record, I think it'd be fair to say. She's scored pretty low on most of those scorecards that those groups bring out. So another race that we're watching closely.
I know I'm a huge advocate for more social workers in representation, in representing people. So that's pretty exciting for me as well.
All right. On that note, the pro social worker lobby has spoken.
The powerful force.
We're going to say thank you so much, Evan, and keep up the good work. And
Great. Thank you,
next
guys.
on our agenda here, we're going to have visit, I believe, from Amy Cookson. Is that right?
Yep, I'm letting her in right now.
So Amy is the communications manager at Planned Parenthood of Maine. And I imagine she's going to talk to us a little bit about the U.S. Senate race.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'll say that Amy and Planned Parenthood have been doing an incredible amount of work on all sorts of different levels this past election cycle, and all through the last 4 years, really. I know I've been in a lot of meetings with Planned Parenthood where they've been managing almost a constant state of crisis with all the attacks their organization has been on, both at the state and national level. So it's definitely going to be really great to hear Amy's perspective.
All right. Well, we seem to be having
starts working.
We seem to be having just a little bit of a delay there, so she'll get on soon. But in the meantime, we had a clip I actually wanted to play, and this is from Evan. So he went to the polls earlier today and went to a bunch of places, but one of them was Lewiston. And there he ran into Lisa Savage, who happens to be running for U.S. Senate. So let's play that clip now.
Well, the false dichotomy of, the candidate you don't want and then the candidate you vote for so you don't get the one you don't want. My whole lifetime, that's what voting has been like. And the opportunity here in Maine to actually vote our values rather than our fears in our first ranking, to show what we care about rather than going,
it looks like she's in now.
Win. I don't dare vote for them because then I'm going to get the incumbent back who I don't want. I think that brings a lot more voice and a more choice and more.
Hi all. I also live in the Portland area and had some buffering broadband network issues.
Okay. Good to know it was not just me. All day.
All right, so I think folks may be hearing some crosstalk here, but we are now joined by Amy Cookson. Hi, Amy.
Good evening. How are y'all doing?
We're doing great.
Making it through. Welcome. I'll just jump right into the question, because thank you so much for joining us. I'm wondering, so we know that issues of reproductive freedom have been so central to the U.S. Senate race in Maine. And with the Supreme Court now in the hands of conservatives, what attacks on reproductive rights are we likely to see in the next couple of years? And what can be done in Congress and at the state level to defend Americans' rights to safe legal abortion?
Great question. Well, first, as you all probably know, there are 17 cases that are one step away from the Supreme Court. In fact, on Friday, the court is going to consider whether to take up Louisiana abortion ban, and we doubt that we have the votes there that we used to in the past, particularly since Justice Ginsburg's passing. The good news in Maine is that safe legal abortion has been codified in Maine law since the early 90s when the Reproductive Privacy Act was passed. So even if Roe were overturned tomorrow, abortion would remain safe and legal here in Maine. And in fact, last year, with strong pro-reproductive health majorities in both the state Senate and the state House, the legislature passed 6 new laws protecting and expanding reproductive health care in Maine, including access to legal abortion. We're waiting tonight to see if we're going to keep those majorities in the legislature. The Planned Parenthood Maine Action Fund PAC endorsed more than 100 legislative candidates this year, some incredible champions, many incumbent legislators with 100% records, and some great new voices for reproductive health and rights. And the Planned Parenthood Maine Action Fund is going to continue our work here in Maine, no matter what happens tonight or tomorrow. In fact, next week we have a Pink Action Forum, which is an opportunity for volunteers and supporters to re-engage in Planned Parenthood Maine Action Fund's work. We'll have a better sense of what the legislature is going to look like and what bills we may be facing in the coming session.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, and your team at Planned Parenthood has had thousands of conversations with Maine voters about the election, especially the U.S. Senate race. Any stories you want to share about what you've heard from voters? Any predictions for what you want to see tonight in that race?
Well, I just quickly on a numbers front, our data team let us know that as of yesterday on the U.S. Senate race, between knocking, texting, and calling, we had reached out to 430,000 voters. So we're incredibly proud of the team, the great volunteer base that they built this cycle, and all of the work that they have done. One story I will share from one of the organizers yesterday. She was speaking with an 80-year-old woman who said that she was tired of the election and she wasn't going to vote, except she hated Trump. And so our organizer had a great conversation with her, persuaded her to vote for Joe Biden and Sarah Gideon. And the woman decided that she would ask her son to take her to the polls and they would spend some time together today voting.
That's a great story.
There are so many. That is just the one that I happened to write down to share. But it's been a fantastic team, and I've been lucky to see stories like that every week from their work. As far as predictions, I think it's going to come down to ranked choice voting. And so maybe we'll talk again next week and see where we are. But it looks to be a very close race. Although I know, again, from the conversations that our folks have been having, that many of the Lisa Savage supporters in particular have been planning to rank Lisa Savage first and Sarah Gideon second.
All right. Well, that's
Amy,
what we
I
heard
know
from the candidate Savage there too, as well.
Yes, in
real
fact, I saw a
focus on
photo
ranked choice
this
voting.
afternoon on Twitter. They were both in, I think, Portland at the same time, and they were doing the COVID elbow bump thing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Amy, and I want to thank you for all the work your team has done. And it's an issue. Those kind of issues that you talked about are ones that we heard over and over at every door and on election day and in the days leading up to it here.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Next up, we're going to talk to Andy O'Brien, and we're getting him on Zoom right now. And as we do that, Ben, I just wanted to ask you, this has been a very interesting election day. Would you say this is your most interesting? Any election day memories you want to share? How this compares? I know you've had some exciting ones here.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think one of the main things that we've talked about getting ready for this election day is how we're trying not to think about it in terms of election day. We got to think about it in terms of election week, election month, however long it takes to actually get the job done. And I do think that I have had some past election cycles where things haven't been over on the first Tuesday in November and they've taken longer. And I think that's important for all of us to keep in mind, that probably whatever happens tonight is just a beginning, and we need to keep plugging away until we see it across the finish line.
Right, and ranked choice voting, much more efficient than multiple runoffs over time.
It is.
So we now have Andy with us, Andy O'Brien, Communications Director for the Maine AFL-CIO.
How you guys doing?
Doing great. How are you doing?
All right. Trying not to pay attention to Twitter. Actually, I was thinking about going to bed like right after this interview, just because, for my sanity.
And by that, you mean watching the next hour and a half of this broadcast, I assume.
Oh, yeah. I might watch that in bed. I don't know.
Well, Andy, I wanted to drop a Senate procedure question on you right off the bat. Ooh. Because I feel like it's not quite as obvious maybe to the folks who aren't as familiar with the legislative process as you are. But obviously, the Susan Collins, Sarah Gideon race is important because of all the issues that folks will be voted on. But the Senate actually operates by some different rules, where even if you have a majority, sometimes you can't get what you want. And so I'm wondering if you could just explain how that works and how the Susan Collins, Sarah Gideon race fits into that, and why it's important, particularly from a worker rights perspective.
I mean, are you referring to like why we should get rid of the filibuster?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just dropping you a little bait right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you all remember back in 2009, after Obama was elected, everybody was freaking out because we needed 60 votes for everything to pass anything. And, that was the threshold that we needed to pass things in the Senate because of, I believe it was because of the filibuster, right? I think so at the time. But I'm not really an expert on parliamentary procedure, but I do know that it holds up a lot of things in the Senate, and we do need some big reforms coming from a labor rights perspective. For us, the biggest piece of legislation that we want to pass is the PRO Act, which is really the most ambitious piece of pro-labor legislation that we've seen in very long time. This would really crack down on a lot of the attacks on workers' rights that we've seen in this country for the past 70 years since Taft-Hartley was passed in 1947. It would ban so-called right-to-work laws that have spread throughout the South and the Midwest, which are basically designed to weaken labor rights and drive down wages and benefits for all workers. It would ban the permanent replacement of striking workers, which, if you know your labor history in Maine, back in 1987, 1988, we had the Big J International Paper Strike, where the company permanently replaced the striking workers with scabs. And they actually went to Congress and they narrowly failed to pass a bill to ban that practice of permanently replacing striking workers. And so the PRO Act would do that. We would finally pass card check legislation is also in that. So it would be huge for working people and their right to collectively bargain. I mean, as we see time and time again, and we've seen this in Maine recently, is that anytime anybody wants to start a union in their workplace, immediately we see this anti-union campaign that really time and time again comes right straight out of the corporate playbook, as we've seen at the Portland Museum of Art and other places. And the PRO Act would really put a stop to a lot of that activity and just say that workers have a right to band together, under the freedom of assembly. So.
One of the interesting things in the U.S. Senate race was at the end, it seemed to come down here, speaking of unions, to BIW, as Maine politics often does, and who supported the workers at BIW more. And there were kind of competing theories of how to support the workers there. Can you say a little bit about that and the claims that were made?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that, we had a strike during this election season, and, very seldom does the media cover labor issues unless there's some big controversy, unless there's a strike, and unless there's some sort of political intrigue. And in this case, we had a strike at BIW. Local S6 went on strike because the company was attacking their seniority provisions and trying to bring in non-union subcontractors. And it just would have really undermined the union and undermined their strength and all the good things that they've been able to fight for over the years. So, they voted, overwhelmingly to strike. And Sarah Gideon was there for them from day one. I mean, back in January, long before they voted to strike, she was out there saying, look, if you're going to get this massive tax break that the legislature just gave you, then you shouldn't be bringing in non-union subcontractors. We should be creating quality jobs at the shipyard. And, that got some attention. Of course, in the Bangor Daily News, they tried to make it look like, there was some sort of quid pro quo with Joy Jackson or something, which was ridiculous. It was really just about keeping the company honest and making sure that if we're going to subsidize, provide tax breaks to the shipyard, that it would create good union jobs. And so when they voted to strike, Sarah Gideon was right down there on the picket lines. You've seen the pictures of her holding the signs. She met with the bargaining committee and she put pressure on the company. And Susan Collins learned that Sarah Gideon was going to be speaking at one of their rallies in July, and she showed up on the picket lines after her for a photo op, and then she left. And they asked her, repeatedly, will you stand with us? This is really important when you're on strike, because you are really putting a lot at risk when you go on strike. I mean, you risk your livelihood. You're not getting your income for your families. I mean, there were people, members of Local S6, who ended up living in their cars briefly. And of course, the union supported them during that time and helped them out of it. But it was a really tough time. And it means a lot if you have public officials on your side, elected officials on your side, telling the company you need to settle a fair contract with these workers. And Susan Collins didn't. And right before the vote on the strike, she got $22,000 in donations from senior executives from BIW and General Dynamics. And lo and behold, she didn't take a side. She's like, nope, I'm just going to let the mediators handle it or whatever. And now she's trying to say, she's down at the shipyard all the time with workers saying, oh, well, look, I ended the strike or whatever. It's just ridiculous.
Well, Susan Collins claiming to be on both sides of an issue and making a lot of money in the process seems to be a major theme of this election. And thank you for your insight, Andy, and for all the work that you've been doing. And we will see you after you get your nap tonight.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
So we have some actual election results to announce. We are, only an hour past the polls closing here, but the AP has called Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and Illinois for Biden. I think probably no surprises there. For Trump, they've called West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So I didn't realize that the Oklahoma polls closed this early, but apparently they do. We're also starting to see some results in main races. We have U.S. Senate race numbers. You can see down below in the screen here. We've got 2% from the BDN leading the race with the AP and the Press Herald there. And Collins is ahead on all of those so far. That's likely because these are some of the smaller, more rural towns that have reported already, but we'll probably see those numbers shift over time. And some similar numbers for president. And we've also seen a few House and Senate races reported. These are mostly ones where there was no opponent or it was very easy to call, but we'll probably see some more specific results there very soon. So I also want to know what that pickup for House is. I think there was probably one seat that was uncontested that switched sides there. But that is all on the state and federal level. Let's get local for a minute with M. Burnett.
Hi. Welcome, M. So I'm going to jump right into a question. First, quick intro. So, M, you've been a volunteer leader with People First Portland, working on the many ballot referenda that you've been in the city. So we know that the opponents of these progressive ballot initiatives usually use this same strategy all the time. They tell us that something sounds like a really good idea in concept, but this ballot policy is flawed. And we know, and they know, that the majority of voters support these progressive policies, but it only takes a little bit of doubt to get into the heads of voters to convince them that maybe this is the wrong step forward. We saw that in many initiatives that we've run, especially in increasing the minimum wage and expanding access to home care. So how did you see this opposition strategy play out with the multiple initiatives in Portland? And what was your strategy to combat that?
Yeah, it came on pretty strong. The very disingenuous kind of bit there, but combating it is kind of leading with what we started with, which is like, these things help people. We are in the middle of 5 crises at once. There's a pandemic. We have housing crisis in Portland that somehow it just like, we never actually get into who's actually causing the crisis or who's profiting from it. But of course you can't do anything to touch the way that we're addressing that, because then no affordable housing will ever get built ever. Yeah, it was pretty enlightening to me. I started following some of the California proposition questions. Prop 21 is rent control. And I went to their website and it was like the same tactics. It gets more insidious though too. They always have people of color as their spokespeople because they want to appear a certain way. It's like a very good liberal airbrush strategy. But yeah, they've got like the same tactics on their front page, no on Prop 21, is these are poorly written. And I don't know, I think that's just a very elitist way of thinking about it. You're like, I'm a better lawyer than you, is kind of their arguments.
We've heard the poorly written referenda charge before.
Yes, no doubt. Because of course, average people can't like make better laws than lawmakers, which is basically their sense, is that direct democracy is no good way of making policy. We're the ones who need to spend 8 months, 8 years, forever trying to pass things that actually help people.
We've seen obviously a ton of money spent in this race from Airbnb and others. I mean, on all of these referenda. I don't think I've seen any polling. Do you have a sense of how this is going to turn out today?
No, I mean, they probably ran polls. I think at some point we snuck into a couple Zooms and got some insider info, which was the same that you said at the beginning. People support them, and so they had to like figure out the best way to poke holes in it. What's the best way to get you to vote against your self-interest is what the polls were doing. And it's $1 million against $40,000. So obviously we don't expect to win any of them. If we come close, we've won.
Way to set expectations.
Just trying to be realistic. But that there is a moment here, and what I have right now is just fragmented information about like in-person voting on Peaks Island and random screenshots from Randy Billings' Twitter. So we don't have a very clear picture.
Although
not necessarily, yeah.
It seems like in Portland, the city is often one of the last places to report results. But I see, or at least I saw on Twitter, that they have like a new counting machine. I think before, like, they just had like 3 monkeys in a cage with an adding machine, and took like 2 days to get results. But it zipped through really fast on the Twitter video, so we may know.
Maybe technology will save us. I'm doubtful, but.
And I'm wondering if you could just, the organization's People First Portland, I wonder if you could bring it back to the people here for a minute and just talk about, what are the real challenges that folks in Portland are facing, and what's the before and after where, if this whole package were to pass, and I think it's interesting that it's a package, what would people's lot, how would they be different if these were to pass?
I mean, right now, a lot of people in the city who are experiencing homelessness or looking for a place to live, a lot of the folks have vouchers for Section 8 housing. It's very easy for a landlord to just say no to renting to someone who has a Section 8. And, so tenant protections, Measure D passes, that makes it illegal for that to happen. That's banning income discrimination. So that's a pretty big one. Of course, there's always, laws passing. There's also the implementation. Raising the minimum wage right away in the middle of a pandemic is huge. And, that we had like a racial uprising at the steps of City Hall. We had people camping out on the steps of City Hall. And I think those two factors, policies that disproportionately are really like helping people who are actually in pain right now. I think some of them, like the Green New Deal, is going to take a little while. That's going to just like really be a thorn in the side of people who want to build inefficient, not affordable housing. But yeah, I'm most attached to tenant protections. I really hope that can get through. Obviously, we can't expect it to. But then Airbnb is also like a very instantaneous sort of like, I'll walk that back. It's not instantaneous. No policy ever is. But essentially, that's returning units, rental housing units to the market, up to 400, potentially more. And that would be pretty quick. Not all of them will get converted, but that's a fast enacting thing that could only help our housing situation here. So yeah, I've got a lot of people I know who are either looking for housing, always looking, or just moving out of Portland. That's the name of the game right now. So
yeah. I'll say, as someone who lives in Portland right now and is in the process of moving out of Portland, my current apartment has re-rented in 1 day from when it was posted. So I've seen it happening. I'm really excited to see just the results from all of the referendums in Portland. I voted yes on every single one. So thank you so much, Em.
But won't you think of the landlords? Yeah.
I mean, I thought about them, but I still voted the way I did. So thank you so much, Em.
Thanks.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks, Em.
Bye.
So from the local, let's go back to the national for a moment here. We have another race to call, and that is, and actually I think I can use my little election result thing here.
Hey guys.
Hey, Sean, welcome.
Apparently my my election result alert is not working, but Cory Gardner is officially out in Colorado, so that's a pickup for Democrats. It puts them one closer to having a Senate majority, and we obviously know that that could come down to the result in Maine. So now we're going to talk
here.
We're going to talk with Sean Smith next. And Ben, would you like to do the introductions?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sean has one of the most stressful jobs in the state of Maine. Every year he's got to find 151 folks to run all in towns all over the state for the House of Representatives, and has done a fantastic job over the years. Not just doing that, but finding really amazing progressives with vision. And just wanna welcome you tonight, Sean. How are you feeling about the little results that have been trickling in so far?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's a pleasure to be on with all of you. This is like the worst time. You've done everything that you can, and now you're just sitting around waiting, and you're getting tidbits of information about all these districts, and you're trying to extrapolate. It's very stressful. Look, I think we, despite this being what we all hope and think is going to be a good year for Democrats, we have our hands full on the House side. We started with 93 seats, which is a very high place for us to start coming out of a midterm. We had 18 members termed out. Republicans only had 3. So we kind of went into this, last year. Look, I think one of the strengths of our campaign is we try to play in all districts. I think there isn't a district in the state where the right Democrat can't win. And, we firmly believe that. But having said that, I think, we started out last year, thinking that it was going to be really tough to keep our numbers this year. It's going to be tough to stay that high. And, we have a lot of amazing candidates. We also have a number of incumbents who are just in very, very difficult seats and won their districts by less than 100 votes 2 years ago. And sometimes they're facing Republicans who might have been termed out 2 years ago. Just a number of really difficult seats that we're defending. I think we have, something like 64 I think we're defending 93 seats, and 29 of those I think are open. So it's a difficult landscape for us. But look, I think we have amazing. It comes down to the quality of candidates, and for the second year in a row, we have a majority of women that are running, which is just so important. We have a lot of young people. We have a lot of doctors and teachers and healthcare providers, and we're really competitive in places where Democrats don't really do too well. So look, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think we're going to have a number of difficult races tonight. So we're anxious, I think.
So Sean, I know you're a bit of a numbers guy. I'm going to throw some up on the screen here. So these are the absentee voting numbers we got from yesterday at the beginning of polls actually opening. I know you're anxious, but do these numbers, more than 500,000 ballots were already returned before voting started in person, does that make you feel any better?
Mike, you're a numbers guy too. Those are a year ago, did you ever think you'd see numbers like that? That is,
it's amazing.
It's just incredible. And I think it goes to, the strength of the Democratic Party, and also, a lot of the allies and the advocates. just the get out the vote effort that they have done over the last 2 months. It's just amazing. I will say though, like when it comes to, look, those numbers do make me feel really good. I mean, I think, in 2016, the last presidential, you saw, what was it, like 770,000 people vote in Maine. And this year you have over 500,000 Democrats with over a 2-to-1 advantage. I mean, that's amazing. I will say when it comes down to House seats and control from the majority, we're looking at a handful of races. The vast majority of resources and effort, goes into about a third of these races that we know are going to come down to a handful of votes. 40 or so races, and within those 40 or so, I would say that, look, House districts are too small to do polling, but I would say 25 of them are just complete toss-ups. And I think, among the swing voters and the low information, undecided voters, those, right in the middle of the road districts, I think that there is a pretty high percentage of those people who waited until the end to vote and aren't really reflected in those numbers. So while I think those numbers are really good, I think in a lot of the districts that we're looking at, in these swing districts, in towns like Jay and Livermore Falls, and in Lewiston and Auburn and in Turner, and a lot of these, I think that there was still a lot of, I think we'll see when the numbers are all in, there were a lot of people that voted or either turned in their requested ballot the last few days of last week or voted on election day. So while those numbers do make me feel really good, it really doesn't tell the whole story in some of these toss-up districts.
I love it, Sean. I know you're a busy guy, but can you squeeze in a quick story here for the viewers about any candidate that's just been going out and just really working hard out there that has kind of inspired you? I know you get to see a lot of people doing so many amazing things in so many districts, and House races, are so small that you can't even poll in them. So a lot of what we have to rely on are the stories of folks working hard. So are there any folks?
Yeah,
in
and that's that's the
you?
best part. I've been doing this for a while now, and honestly, what keeps me coming back is these stories and working with these amazing people. There's so many people that come to mind, but State Representative Henry Ingerson of Arundel, won a House seat that it's Arundel, Dayton, and part of Lyman. Really a district that Democrats don't have any business representing, and he won the seat last year. He worked so hard. He's a retired teacher, wasn't a political bone in his body, and he just went out and ran an amazing race. He served on the education committee the past 2 years. For all of us who worked with him, he's just you just don't meet a nicer guy than Henry Ingerson. And quietly, I think he probably ran one of the best races in the entire state. And he's in a very, very difficult district, and I don't know what's going to happen in that district tonight. He's up against Wayne Perry, who is a 4-term incumbent. But Henry is just he has so much family in that district, and he's such a loving guy. I'm not sure there's a guy that's more beloved in the legislature, and a Democrat through and through, but somebody who just represents everybody in the district and does it so well. There's a woman running out in Bethel. Her name is Savannah Sessions. She works for the Historical Society out there, and that district, it's House District 117. It's a crazy district. It goes from Bethel and Lovell all the way up to Rangeley. It takes 2.5 hours to drive through the district, and she has just worked her heart out. And that's a race, against Fran Head, where, a few cycles ago, we lost by 200. We had an amazing candidate run a couple years ago. We lost by 80. She's an equally amazing candidate. And it's just a very, very difficult district that has about 40 towns in it. And we just have so many great people running. And that's that's really why we love doing this. There's 186 legislators in the building, and so few of them are professional politicians. You can count them on one finger. Most of them are just nice, normal people who never would have run unless somebody asked them. And they're just genuine good people. And we just love working with them. And when you can get them elected and then have them do the great work, it's pretty awesome.
Well, thank you, Sean, so much for all your work and the team and all that inspiring grassroots effort out there. And good luck with the rest of the night.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great to be with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for everything you do. See ya.
So next we're going to have Molly and Dana join the chat here. I think we're seeing a few more results across the country, mostly states that you'd expect. Maybe one that you wouldn't is that Texas in initial returns is trending toward Biden. Florida trending toward Trump, so we'll see how that works out. MPA staff here have noted, Andrew, our Deputy Communications Director, that Florida is going to Florida. So we'll see how that turns out. But let's talk next to Molly.
Hey, Molly, and welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you all?
We're doing great. I thought maybe we could first kick it off and have you talk a little bit about the Wabanaki Alliance, what it is and how that got off the ground this year.
Well, let's say first that she is not only president of the Wabanaki Alliance, but ambassador of the Penobscot Nation. We should put the titles in there.
Absolutely, yeah, my mistake. Yeah, so Molly, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys all are moving this year?
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for having me. So yeah, the Wabanaki Alliance is a really exciting thing that we've developed. We sort of saw a lot of momentum happening around tribal issues with the Indigenous Peoples Day bill, the ban on Indian mascots in Maine, and then kind of this large chunk of work we've all done on the 1980 Settlement Act in coordination with Wabanaki leaders and lawmakers. So the tribes are very united on so many issues lately, and we all came together to write those 22 recommendations that ended up in legislative form. And we kind of seized on that moment thinking, our ancestors were all very much collaborating a lot and we were allies. So why don't we try to form some kind of coalition together so when we advance these efforts in the future, we're a very united front. So the Wabanaki Alliance is a 501c4. We're doing a lot of advocacy and education around these issues of sovereignty in Maine. And I think that I'm already seeing really great discussions happening from it. And, a lot of times, I think a lot of people in Maine don't really know where to turn to talk about tribal issues. There are 5 tribal communities. We're all very unique with different needs. And when people want to help or need more information, it's great to have one place to kind of come to where we're all represented.
And one of the things I liked most about the endorsements that you guys put out, and a lot of places, a lot of organizations put out endorsements, but you had kind of a friends and enemies list. What was the champions and adversaries? Was that it?
Yes.
So why did you choose to do that? And how do you think your champions and adversaries are going to be doing tonight?
I think that, we had a discussion at the board level. Do we only want to do champions? Do we only want to do the votes and the numbers? And I think we saw an opportunity to make a statement that no matter what party you're with, no matter, how kind of woke you think you are, that, when you continue to not support tribal sovereignty or make kind of, passively racist statements about the tribes, I think we need to make an example of that. And I think that we need to get away from this paternalistic attitude of the state government over the tribes. And I think a clear way to do that is to not really play nice all the time, and that's not to say we were being mean. It's just, I think there's so many barriers in understanding and how people in Maine view the tribes. So by saying this person is against tribes having gaming, even if you're against gaming as a philosophical standpoint, it's part of tribal sovereignty that we have access to the rights of other federally recognized tribal nations. So it's little nuances like that. And I really hope it doesn't cause a lot of bad feelings. I really hope that it's the starting point for a lot of really good discussions. And I think it will be. And I know that it was kind of, in your face and really blatant and the champions and adversaries.
We like that.
I like it too. But I do think it sends a strong message. And I really believe that there will be positive outcomes from it. And I truly hope the champions are doing well tonight. I know that we have so many people, even that we didn't even get to list, that have been supportive of different tribal efforts. And I'm just glad that not only are we at the table, we're really seem to be being heard.
We really appreciate that, Molly. And I know that the major legislation that you were working on this year to revise the Land Claims Settlement Act and restore more rights to tribes, unfortunately, was not able to go forward because of the pandemic closing the legislative session down. Could you just give folks a little bit of an update on where the prospects for that reform is, and why it's so important, of what we can hope to accomplish next year?
Absolutely. So a lot of the tension between the tribes and the state all goes back to this document in 1980, and I would probably need hours to walk everybody through all the bits and pieces of it. But basically what we did in this task force was identify 22 different areas where we can clear up jurisdictional problems and where we can really bring the main tribes to a place of equity with other tribes in the country. There's other tribes in the country that also live under Land Claims Settlement Acts that aren't restricted by the state so much, and they still have their sovereignty acknowledged. So as you mentioned, Ben, we were kind of stopped abruptly, as a lot of people were. We were able to get that legislation through the Judiciary Committee, and we broke it down into 3 parts kind of strategically. We kept the larger bill intact. We took out the gaming as a standalone bill, and then we took out a few provisions where we saw some paths forward with the governor's office and the attorney general's office. So we are talking right now if we want to keep that 3-bill format when we go back into the 130th and kind of how that looks. But definitely look for us to be reigniting this issue and getting these recommendations in some form in front of the legislature again.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Molly, for all your hard work. It's always a pleasure to see you in the halls and on Zoom. And we got our fingers crossed for all the tribal sovereignty champions tonight.
Thank you so much. Me too.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
You too. Take
Thanks,
care.
Molly.
So next, I think it's time for an update in the U.S. Senate race. Folks can see below we have a few results from the BDN, the Press Herald, and the AP. BDN, again, winning so far. We'll see if that keeps up. But we'll go to Ben first, and you're going to give us a little bit of an update on what we're seeing here so far.
That's right. So for folks who are seeing the results come in, superficially, it looks like mostly red towns reporting back in. But I just want to go underneath that for 1 second and look at Pownell, Maine. So this is a small rural town in the state, and it is true right now that Collins narrowly came out ahead, 586 to 534 over Gideon. But I just want to step back and compare that to the last time Collins had a race that was nationally targeted, which was in 2008 when she was running against Tom Allen. And she nearly doubled Allen's vote in Pownell in that year, beating him 618 to 384. So the fact that in a rural town like Pownell, Gideon is coming up within 50 votes or so is a very positive sign for her. And I'd even highlight a little town, Bremen, where Gideon has actually flipped that. She just beat Collins there 296 to 224.
Oh, wow.
Previously, Collins had won that 291 to 230 against Allen in 2008. So even though we're mostly seeing smaller rural towns reporting in, I'd say that it would be premature to draw any big conclusions, of course, but it's notable that Gideon is certainly already showing signs that she's running very, very strong tonight, particularly compared to past challengers to Collins.
All right, and we are seeing those numbers on the Press Herald so far are at 59% for Collins. And to give you a sense of what Ben's talking about here, the towns that have been called so far are Frankfort, Moscow, Chesterville, Etna, DeBlois, Greenwood, Wells, Jay, Sanford, Newburgh, Kenduskeag. VZ, Otis, I mean, a lot of smaller towns, a lot of more conservative areas. So if the numbers are that close there, that is, as you're saying, a pretty good sign. All right. Esther, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Beth, for joining us. Beth, you're the Director of Government Affairs at the Maine Conservation Voters.
That's right.
And awesome. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about how are you feeling after the polls closed an hour and a half ago?
I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling a little disappointed in Florida, as we all are, for Biden. I mean, Biden, you know, we desperately want Joe Biden to be president. He actually believes that climate change is a problem and he will address it. So, you know, we're hoping that Texas and Ohio and Pennsylvania pull in. So for Biden. And yeah, this is such a critical election, as we all know. So.
Yeah. So we know that climate change is an issue that seems really daunting for a lot of us. And it's like, what can we do on our everyday individual level to help stand up locally and statewide? And what can we ask folks to do on the personal level?
Well, the person, I mean, you know, the voter turnout in Maine was fabulous. And, you know, more than 504,000 people voted early, which is great. And that's the strongest thing that people can do, right? Vote for climate champions. You know, we endorsed 129 climate champions in the state legislature, and we're thinking that many of them are going to win. And that's because people care about climate in Maine, and that's been proven time and again. So everybody, all our federal delegation gets it, and the state legislature gets it, except for the House Republicans. So hopefully that's a shift this year. So that's the most important thing. The other thing is just, you know, live by example, use less energy, drive energy efficient cars, turn off your lights. There's so many things. You hang out your clothes. There's so many things you can do to save energy, to be aware, you know, make your house energy efficient. There's lots of things you can do to save yourself money and to protect the earth. You know, those things where it's exciting because we're living in a time where these things are coming together. Like electric vehicles 10 years ago were out of price range for most people, but their incentives and the price keeps coming down. The same thing with solar panels. You know, solar is the most affordable means of energy in this state right now. So I'm happy to that. Maine in 2019 set very ambitious climate goals. And right now Maine is working on a climate action plan to figure out how we're going to meet those goals. And as in many other states, you know, that's the thing that I'm holding on to, that no matter what happens at the federal level, the states are acting, and the states are acting positively on climate. And we're going to do that with our climate champions this year. You know, we're going to get to 100% clean energy by 2050. We're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 80% by 2050. Those are big, broad goals, and many, many states have the same ones. So.
Well, that's the kind of optimism I want at this point of the night. We'll see how things go from here.
Mike, about what's happening in this state, right?
Yeah, and I want to say you guys win because I believe the last canvassing Get Out the Vote call I got, making sure I turned in my ballot, was from conservation voters.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time. This year was the first year that we really devoted a lot of time to, you know, to voting by mail and absentee voting. We wanted 60 to 70% of Maine voters to vote absentee, and it looks like we're going to get there. So that's pretty exciting, to make it so that people didn't have to choose between their health and voting, right? So that was the best way to do it. So yes, we spent lots of time and energy asking people to vote and vote early, and then hounding them to get their ballots in.
Well, thank you for hounding me and for hounding all of us. I did hear that again and again as an issue that came up, you know, to a degree that, you know, I was surprised at, given the saliency of the issue of climate change in past elections. Like, it really is a motivating factor now for so many people, especially in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and Sarah Gideon she was a climate champion when she was in the legislature before she became speaker. She championed a huge solar bill. That's now law, but she did that, 6 years ago, and the Governor LePage at the time vetoed it, and we lost the veto override by 2 votes. But she's been she did an amazing job pulling together a huge stakeholder process and got everyone to agree on a solar bill. Everyone except the governor, that is, the Governor LePage at the time. We're glad that Governor Mills is such a climate champion too. So we want Sarah to carry that to Washington. Jared Golden, we think he's going to win. He's been another climate champion, and it's, we all assume that Representative Pingree, who's been a tremendous climate champion for a long time, is going to remain in DC. So those are all positive things. Holding on to the positive, Mike.
All right, that's a good way to put it. Thank you so much, Beth, and we will talk to you after this and keep fighting on those issues.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Beth.
Beth, have a great night.
All right, we are starting to get some of the first results in from Portland. With 3 of 12 districts in, Green New Deal, speaking of climate change, is only down by 10, 55% no, 45% yes. Not sure what districts those are yet, but we'll keep an eye on that in the other referendums as well as the other ones here. And next we're going to talk to John Kaczynski with the Maine Education Association. Hey, and there's John. And
hello,
so
everybody. Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Great, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for hosting this tonight. So nice to be with you all.
Thanks for being here. So you're Government Relations Director. What kind of government are you going to be relating with after tonight?
We hope it's a government that wants to better fund public schools and make sure that our teachers can do the best they can to provide education to 180,000 kids during a global health pandemic. That's what we're hoping for.
So I want to show you something here. This is an article that was on Beacon just a couple weeks ago about teachers really taking the lead here and running for the legislature this year. This was something I'm sure you were very proud of, might have had a hand in. But what does it mean to have so many educators running for office and possibly serving?
It's awesome. I love that story, especially because this is something we've been working very hard at the MEA for years and years and years. One saying I have at the MEA that many members will repeat to you that have been in a room with me is we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, we have permanent issues. But I also tell folks the way we're going to make a difference and the way we're going to make an impact is by having educators, people with classroom experience who've actually spent time in classrooms, in our schools, who understand them. If we really want to make fundamental change for our kids and our schools, we really have to have educators step up. And I was overwhelmed this year to see so many amazing educators step up and run for State House and State Senate, to put their name out there and to put their ideas out there. And I'm hoping for a great night tonight for educators because we have a bunch of them running all over the state. And Sean was just on a few minutes ago talking about one of my favorite ones, Henry Ingwerson, running down in Arundel. He's an awesome, spent 20 or 30 years teaching in the Wells Public Schools, and now he's sitting on the Education Committee making decisions that impact the 17,000 other educators and teachers in this state. So we're hoping to see Henry successful, and we have plenty of others I'm happy to talk about.
So, John, this is so exciting to see this, and we're also got our fingers crossed for all the great folks that are running. And I can already hear, no matter what happens tonight after Election Day, people are going to say, well, the state's got a record budget shortfall. Now's not the time to be fully funding schools. We're not going to be able to pay even the bills that we have right now. And, maybe we'll have to do cuts, and even pitting some people against each other, schools versus healthcare versus state workers. So what kind of message do you want to make sure folks are hearing about what the state legislature needs to do when they come in to deal with these challenges?
That's a great question. We always hear now is not the time. We heard that a lot during the LePage years. Now's not the time to fund schools. We got to give tax breaks to the wealthy. Now's not the time. now is the time. What schools have done in the middle of a global pandemic, the fact that we are educating kids in every community in this state, that we are being innovative, we are developing remote learning programs for students to try to keep them connected and engaged with their public schools. And I have to give credit to Governor Mills, because we have seen significant increases in state aid for schools to help them during this time. We've got to maintain that commitment going forward. The pandemic is not going away. And in fact, our numbers in Maine continue to tick up. We're certainly seeing concerns about schools and the COVID in certain schools, and definitely some quarantining, et cetera, that's happening. Everything that our schools are doing takes resources, and there's simply not going to be the resources locally from property taxes to give schools what they need to properly educate kids, to do the best they can for kids while we're dealing with a global health pandemic. And I just have to tell you, if you've talked to teachers, they're working their tails off. They're pouring their hearts into this. We're seeing teachers leave the profession. We're seeing burnout. So many teachers are saying they can't believe it's not spring break already because of the work that's been taking place over the past 2 months to get schools ready and then to welcome kids into the schools. So we need to reward them. We need to support educators. We need to make sure there's funding. And the best way we can do that is to make sure we're sending educators to go fill those seats in Augusta so that their voices are there demanding what schools need.
And maybe they can even be voting for some tax increases on the wealthy to make sure everybody's needs get taken care of, right?
And Benjamin, we don't object to that. In fact, when they said now's not the time, we put a ballot initiative in front of the voters to say now's the time. And you know what? The voters agreed with us. So wouldn't be opposed to trying that again if there's no success going forward. But I'm confident there's going to be success. I'm confident we're going to see educators in these seats, and I'm confident we're going to have advocates in Augusta who are going to stand up for kids in schools and educators.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much, John. And
thank
hope
you
we
for
see
having
those
me.
things.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
thank you, everybody.
Take care.
So next we're going to talk with Julia Brown from the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee. Before we do that, any more updates you want to give, Ben, on how the Senate race is looking? I know you're watching some bellwether towns here.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight another small town, Georgetown, that has flipped. So in 2008, Collins won that, over 400 votes to low 300s for Tom Allen, and that's basically switched this year. So Gideon just won that, 434 to Collins 352. It's another more rural area, more on the coast. Again, this is just sending strong signs for Gideon right now. So these early results, they don't mean a ton. But when you look at some of the details here, it's a lot of positive things to be feeling hopeful about.
Great. And we do have Julia here. And thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Julia. And there's so many great Senate races that we've been talking about tonight. I wonder if you just wanted to highlight a couple that you're kind of waiting by your phone for the text results to come in to see how this is going to go. What are the things that voters should really be watching closely tonight as the results come in?
Yeah, obviously, Senate Democrats have a majority. And so, walking into this cycle, I expected my map to be protect, protect, protect. But we actually really have some of the best suited candidates to flip a couple of our seats this year. One that definitely has me on the edge of my seat is Coach Joe Rafferty in SD 34, which is Kennebunk and Wells. 41-year educator, MEA negotiator, just all around beloved candidate who went out and was one of our top door knockers. This is a red seat that's now open. It was formerly held by Bob Foley, moderate, Mr. Nice Guy, Republican that keep this stronghold on some of our more purple districts. So I'm really excited to see this flip. And of course, I'd be remiss not to bring up Chloe Maxman, who is just a force to be reckoned with, taking on Dana Dow. I think Dana Dow is in some real trouble. Again, he's trying to toe this line about being an ethical moderate, but when you become the minority leader of your party, the sins of Trump and Susan Collins become his sins as well. So to have such a radically transparent candidate like Chloe, I think is going to give him a run for his money. And then obviously there's, some big protects for us. Mike Carpenter up in CD2, representing the county. He's running against Trey Stewart, who's a young, rich guy with the right last name who wants to be governor someday. And Mike Carpenter is going to be the one to stop him with the help from a lot of different groups that have been on tonight, as well as from our caucus. Those are the three to watch, in my opinion.
Cool. Thanks, Julia. I'm wondering, has anything that you've seen so far surprised you about the results?
So we're getting the in-person votes first, and the absentee are lagging. And so all of my races are skewing Republican right now. So it is literal nightmare to look at the spreadsheets at this moment. And so we're just like trying to stay positive for the absentee stuff to come in. But that's where we're at right now.
And even on those early results, if I'm understanding them correctly, Shenna Bellows is looking pretty good, right? And that was certainly not a race that we were going to take for granted there. And I wonder if you want to say a little bit about what some of the dynamics were on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Shenna has been one of those top protect races cycle after cycle. It's a Trump district with a progressive in the seat. And so really what you're seeing, these positive numbers from Shenna, is just a testament to like sheer will and hard work from a lot of different folks to make her a little bit more inoculated this cycle than we've seen in past.
Yeah, she's been a great champion for labor rights. And even back when she was heading up to ACLU in Maine, so many of the fights that we're seeing in the national spotlight right now for immigrant rights and civil liberties have been really big causes for her. So it's good to see folks like that hopefully returning.
For sure. I don't know what the word bellwether means, so
I think my audio was off there, but I was asking about if there was one bellwether seat we should keep our eyes on.
Just for example, I know since I look across the river to Ned Claxton over in Auburn, I feel like anytime the Republicans win that seat, they tend to have control of the Senate, and anytime the Democrats, that's just one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like Ned's in, like I'm feeling really, really good about tonight. Are there any races like that are catching your eye?
Yeah, Ned is obviously a perennial worry. As you know, that seat flips every 2 years. Honestly, for the last 20 years, no senator has held it for 4 years other than Eric Brakey. And it's extremely susceptible to the waves of the year. So we're lucky that Ned Claxton only has a couple of towns, because when we get his results early, just like you said, if Ned's looking good, that probably means we're looking good in a lot of other places. So I think Androscoggin County in general is kind of a place to watch.
All right. Well, we'll keep watching Androscoggin County. I'm sure you will, Ben. And thank you so much for your time tonight, Julia.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Julia.
So I want to go next to, we don't have actual election results. We're starting to get them in. I think we're at 30-something% in the U.S. Senate race in terms of returns. Oh, no, 13% and 30% so far for Gideon on those, because of which towns mostly have reported in so far. But let's go to some results that we do have right now, and these are betting results. So some people think these work better than polls. These are the numbers from PredictIt, which is a service that lets you bet real money on real political races. And so, people are putting their money on the line. These have been proven to be some accurate predictions. And I thought it was interesting. They didn't even bother with Congressional District 1. But CD2, there was a bit of a majority looking at a Democratic hold. There was a 69-cent to 33-cent on the dollar advantage for the Democratic candidate in the U.S. Senate race. And it looked good on the presidential as well. The one that was a bit closer and that actually had a Republican lead was Trump winning CD2. So I guess we'll see how those results come out. Esther and Ben, did you have any money riding on this election?
No. I didn't even know this existed, so that's probably a good thing because I probably would have put some money down.
Yeah, I'm not quite smart enough on predictions to make that happen, but I'm excited to talk to some of the folks who've been leading the New Mainers Alliance, turning out new citizens, because I think they've probably got some on the ground information that can help shed light on how some of these predictions are going to shake out tonight.
Let's go there.
Well, yeah, I want to welcome Mutaz Abdul-Rahim from the New Mainers Alliance, co-director there with Fasia Musa, who's been doing a lot of great work getting out the vote, not just this cycle, but for several cycles now. So welcome, Mutaz. Why don't you share a little bit about what you all have been up to and how it's been feeling out there so far?
Thank you, Benchin. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike and Esther. So things are going very well. I can say from the side of the New Mainers population. I think this election we will reach a record number of New Mainers voting in this election, and luckily also we have many new registrations, which is a very good indication of new citizens or young people who are eligible to vote now from our community. And that's a great news during this election. Usually when we have new registration up, that's an indication of an added number. So things in the ground honestly looks in general good. I think the turnout in all polling stations is not that great today in general. My observation, especially the last couple of hours, when you expect that there'll be a very huge lines and rush on many of the polls. And I was I'm here in Portland, so I was managing things on the ground here in Portland. And that means that our early voting worked. We have huge number of people who voted early, but Trump people did not show up. So I hope that's the case, and that they are the one who are making the polls light today. And I think that will advantage our candidates.
Absolutely. Mutaz, it wasn't too many years ago where Republicans were saying, you know what, we need to start courting immigrant voters. Our pathway is going to be being moderate on immigration and trying to appeal to sort of traditional cultural values that folks might be, bringing from their home country. And I wonder if you could share just a little bit on how hard is it working in immigrant communities right now to get people to vote against Trump, against Susan Collins? Has that Republican effort to get immigrants materialized into anything, or are people pretty upset with how Trump and Collins have been behaving?
In fact, that's a very great question. Thank you, Ben. For the immigrant community, in fact, nowadays, to get them energized and to get them fired up to vote, you just mentioned two things: immigration, Trump immigration policies, and COVID. That will get all the arguments in your favor.
Just say those two words.
To come out with just two words: immigration and this. Because honestly, his policies are nothing but in the contrary of what their effort or what they were saying that we're going to do during Trump time. The first thing he did is initiating the Muslim ban and including many countries that they have a great number of immigrants here in Maine into that bracket, which is really helped into showing the real immigration policies that the Democratic Party is following. Regarding Susan Collins, I believe, also tying her to the policies that he initiated during that time and her lack of objection, lack of demonstrating a leadership with all the years that he has been in the Senate, with the ranking position that he has within the Republican Party, and her silence regarding those policies, or not opposing them strong enough, that also made all the new menace, angry towards what she has been doing in the last 4 years. And also voting with Trump all this time and supporting his policies was a great reason for new menace to vote against her this election. Although I will be fair and say that at many times she was very helpful for individual new menace when they needed help from her, and when they seek support in immigration issues and things like that. We can give her that. But in the last 4 years, in general, she was being very harmful for the new menace cause and for the new menace policies and for their efforts to get their families to join them here because of the policies of Trump in the last 4 years.
And Mutaz, I know folks might not often connect these dots, but you all have been providing rides to the polls in a pretty innovative way. And we've been relying on that service as well, actually, at Maine People's Alliance. Pretty cool immigrant-owned small business helping to get folks where they need to go today. Do you just want to share a little bit about what that is and how that's been working?
Yes, in fact, yeah, this is I think a couple of cycles now through our strategical alliance with the Maine People Alliance. We have been sharing together this innovative, I think, way of helping and encouraging new Mainers and the general public to participate in elections. So what we started doing is that offering, in fact, during canvassing, one of the survey question that we have is that how are you going to get to the polls? How are you going to vote? Do you need a ride? In order to make them think about that. And many, they say, yes, yeah, I will need a ride, because not all Mainers own a car. Not all new Mainers are having more than one car in the house. So even if they want to go out, then they have to be all of them together, or otherwise they will not be able to move around. So providing a ride encourages people, in fact, to plan, to go out and vote, especially during the early voting and the last week of the early voting. It has been very helpful. It has been a very encouraging way of doing. Today I was in several polls, and then honestly, I don't know all of the driver personally of the taxis, but when I see a taxi with a new Mainer, I wait for them until they come out, and I approach them. Oh, are you here to vote? And usually the answer is, no, I'm just bringing someone to vote. So I tell him, oh, okay. Who are you working with? And then he tells me, of course, not all the taxi drivers know me. So he tells me, I'm working with the New Mainers Alliance for doing this. I tell him, okay, it's working. Yeah, so it has been very helpful. It's an added benefit to get the people energized to go and solve an acute issue. In Portland specifically, this is working because most of the polling locations, they do not have an access to a good parking. So for someone to come to vote, and then he doesn't have to worry about parking, dropped off, then picked up after they vote, that was very encouraging for them to come and vote. Very convenient for them to come out and vote.
Amazing. Well, Mutaz, thank you so much for all of your work and all the effort the team has been putting out there, and hopefully it's all about to pay off. Have a great rest of the night.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And honestly, we wouldn't have done it without the great support that we are finding from Maine People Alliance and our other partners, in this work. So thank you very much. Thank you for all that you do.
Excellent. Thanks, Mumtaz. Take care.
Have a good night.
So we're getting through the order here. We have had just a marathon of guests, and I feel like we're pretty close to being on time, and the time we told them all to show up. So this has been better than I expected. But the next one is someone that's very exciting for me, and she's going to join us in just a moment here. This is Lori Osher, and I think she's going to be. I hope I'm not jinxing it here. But she is about to be elected to Maine House District 123 and become my new representative. I see she's on. Let's go right to Lori. Hey,
Hello.
Lori.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, thanks for being on. And we should say you are not just, I won't jinx it yet, but possibly a elected official here. But you're a small business owner, a longtime advocate on issues including climate change and other science-based policies, I think it's fair to say, and have been a real activist with Maine People's Alliance and the Maine Small Business Coalition.
Yes.
And,
So
finally
I'm a town
bringing
councilor.
some dignity to the Orono House seat, which has been held by my ne'er-do-well brother for 8 years.
Your brother has done a fabulous job. Big shoes to fill, not just because his feet are bigger than mine, but because he's done such a great job.
So what, if you are elected today, will you be focusing on in Augusta?
Well, I want to focus on the progressive agenda. There's so many great things that have been proposed that they went to committee, and some of them came out of committee as ought to pass, and then the legislature stopped business. So there's so much that was already on the table when 2,500 bills came in for the last session. There's so much that I want to partner with people to move it back through so that those things could pass. But specifically, my own background is that I'm a soil scientist, and I got a PhD specifically to study how we could store carbon in soils beneath wildlands, so forests and agriculture and grasslands. And that's what brought me to Maine. I was a professor at the university, and I was a soil science professor, and my research was all about how you manage land to store carbon. And as I'm talking about, I went to graduate school 30 years ago to study, so 1991, to study soil carbon storage, thinking that I would create the research results that could be used by policymakers so they could set policy that would talk about how you could manage land to store carbon. And as you know, there's been no policy. 30 years have gone by, no policy. So I have a different job that's about the carbon cycle. My day job is to make buildings more energy efficient. And the more efficient buildings are, the less energy is used to heat them or for electrical. And so whatever kind of heat you're using, you use less. And so then you're not putting carbon in the atmosphere, since so many of our heating fuels and utilities are carbon-based. So I'll be looking at using my expertise as a scientist and a business owner that focuses on how we can manage our environment and our homes to be more energy efficient and therefore have less of an impact on the atmosphere.
So I think that's really one of the advantages of Maine's citizen legislatures, that people with that kind of experience, with all different realms of experience, can bring it to bear in the State House. So that's if and when you get to Augusta. I know tonight you have already been out there picking up all your signs. You said this was a bit of a ritual. You couldn't be on right at 8 because you had to go do that. Have you seen or heard anything in that trip around the community that makes you optimistic, or not just for your race, but for all the races up and down the ticket here?
Well, it was cold, and it was, it gets dark early now, so I can't say that. Actually, I have a team of people. And for anyone who's in Orono that's listening, this might be the first time. This is the third time I've run for office. I ran for town council twice and won those races, and always picked up my signs right after the polls closed. So that was the plan for tonight. But I had more signs, and some of the folks texted in and said it's really cold and dark. So I don't know if they'll all be gone, because we broke up into teams. But my team picked up 30. So those are gone. And mostly people were very nice to let me put my signs on their lawns. And those I saw this evening said, I voted for you. So, but of course, they hosted my sign. I went to the polls today. I stood at the polls, and I was really excited to see there was a steady stream, but there wasn't a line outside. So I went to the polls also on October 17th, University of Maine and UMaine U Vote and the town clerk organized, or the town of Orono organized an early absentee voting. So it was set up just like election day, only it was on the Saturday, the 17th, from 10 until 3 p.m. or 11 maybe till 3 p.m. And that was at the UMaine Fieldhouse. And I stood outside there because I can only have 50 people in the room. And it was packed, mostly students, all day and with long lines. And that was the 17th of October. So Orono then had several other days at the town office that were announced as early absentee voting, set up like a regular voting day. Whereas for those who don't know, in Maine, we have this, you can vote absentee at any time a month before the election. You could just go to the town office. Because of COVID, you have to make an appointment to go to our town office. So that means you would have to make an appointment to vote. So they set up these days that were designed, that the office was closed for regular business, but it was designed so that people could come in, and took a lot of the pressure off, because there were not outside lines today at the main field house.
I've definitely seen that too on campus. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of activism among students. I know, Esther, that's something you've really been working on with your fellows at campuses across the state here. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I think we'll see some good student turnout numbers. Thank you, Lori,
great.
so much. I know you have to go tonight, but thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Lori.
So next, I think we actually do have some results to call. So
okay, so
Ben, to you.
Yeah, I think the big one here to draw folks' attention to is it does look like Ned Claxton has beat Matt Leonard in the state Senate race in Auburn. And for folks who are remembering, this is the race that Julia was just telling us had ping-ponged back and forth pretty much every cycle for the last 20 years. And Eric Brakey had been the only one recently to hold it twice in a row. And I would say, oh, this is a race where it's like, if we win this, feeling really good. So congratulations to Ned Claxton, a real champion for universal health care and lots of other progressive causes. So things are definitely on the state Senate side. I think that's kind of our first very definitive positive result that we can report back here.
That's great to hear.
That's awesome.
And perhaps to share some more positive news, I think folks can see we've been joined by Jeff McCabe. He's the Director of Politics and Legislation for the Maine Service Employees Association, our union, or at least Esther and I's. Ben is management. And Jeff leads the union's lobbying, electoral, and member mobilization program. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
It's great to be on. I'm hoping folks can hear me all right. I'm actually live from the Skowhegan town office tonight. I came down to fill a last minute request to be here for the ballot count and to watch that process. And, it's important in central Maine and rural Maine that, folks get out and watch that process. So it's a little bit different than, past elections as far as not as many folks here. There's somebody here from the Trump campaign. I'm here to call in some votes for some volunteership for the Democratic Party. And then candidate Betty Austin's here. So it's nice to spend time with my representative, Betty Austin, who is just really an outstanding vocal person for our community here. So yeah, it's great to be here.
We can pretend like we planned this, that you're there providing our live correspondent role at the polls.
I'm actually using one of the voting booths right now in the hallway, so I think you can see the sides right here, but it's kind of neat. So feels like old home. I still remember the first time I ran for office here in Skowhegan, and it was in 2008, and they were counting votes until 2:33 in the morning. So I'm hoping that we're not here that late tonight, but it's pretty exciting. There's a hand count going on for a local initiative around a new fire station. So a much needed public safety fire station building here in the community. And I believe it's the second or third time it's been voted on. So, but yeah, no, what an exciting cycle. I was doing labor doors today. The work that MSCA does is in a much broader labor universe with our partners at Maine IFL. So that's, pretty great to get out there and actually talk with folks and, be part of that. So, yeah.
Jeff, I know you've got a lot of unique perspectives because you've been in leadership in the House, and you've seen how the sausage gets made when it comes to passing budgets. And we were just talking to John Kaczynski a little bit about how we can already hear after the election, no matter what the results, we're going to say, oh, there's a big budget deficit. We've got to make big cuts. We can't afford to do right by state workers and schools and healthcare. I just wonder, what's your advice to lawmakers as they start to figure out how to piece this together? How can we make all these important issues aren't pitted against each other?
Yeah, absolutely. We got involved in a number of races this year. We reached out to, folks running for both the House and the Senate and really had them sort of prioritize the folks that we represent. We represent folks that work in the executive branch. We represent folks that work in the judicial branch. We also represent a number of really important, social service agencies and folks that provide services to the state. So it's really just what you said, Ben. It's not pitting one against the other. There needs to be a discussion around revenue when we go back to this next legislative session. And by we, I mean all those people that are affected by state budgets need to take an active role. And that work's going to start for us tomorrow. So
that's excellent. Yeah, maybe tacking some rich people might be a good idea to help.
Yeah. And there's no way that the revenue shortfalls that we're facing are going to just be taken care of by cuts to state services and, cuts to state employees and cuts to education funding. Those are real people that have those jobs. I know that my children rely on the services that they get at school, and, it's going to take people sort of speaking up.
So, Jeff, you are going to be our last guest for the evening here. Any words of wisdom you want to, provide as a conclusion to this broadcast? Obviously not the conclusion of the election results, which could go on for weeks here. We'll be patient with that. But from what you've seen and what you know, what do you want to say to folks?
I think there's a lot of work that Maine people need to do. Maine people need to introduce themselves, to their elected officials. They need to start advocating for the things that they care about. Their priorities, and just make those introductions both on the state and federal level. And that work's going to start, I think, for all of us, immediately following this election. And I think also people need to be, patient. I think we're not going to know all of these races and their outcomes tonight. We'll probably go to bed and there'll still be some questions. And I think that's okay. It's really about being patient and making sure that all votes are counted and that all voices are heard. And then the work starts, for all of us sort of, getting together and just, moving forward as a state and, local locations and also as a nation. We really need to move forward and sort of reinvent what we want to do post-pandemic. And also, there's an economic recovery that we need to rewrite the script and describe what that economic recovery is going to look like. So, I think it's a time that essential workers need to be heard. And I think there's a lot of us that want to be part of that effort.
All right. Well, I think all voters being counted and all voices being heard is a good way to leave it there. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. It sounds like they have some results. I better go over there.
All right. Let us know.
Thank you.
For those of you who had the cat or kids square on your bingo card, you can check that off. I think the Zoom guest couldn't see it, but the Hobbs has joined me here at the decision desk. He was banging on the door. So I think we're winding down to the end of our broadcast here, but we have a few minutes left. Any final calls you want to make, Ben, or final conclusions we want to offer? Obviously, this night will go on, and the counting could go on for quite a while here.
Well, for the State House of Representatives, it's clear that Democrats are sitting at 30 seats. We've only got 11 Republican seats in right now, and those are seats they started the night with just because they were uncontested, and then one independent seat. So We don't know that much about where the House is at, but what we do know does seem positive. And then similarly on the Senate side, we know that the two unopposed Democratic senators have won, and then the big pickup with Ned Claxton in Auburn. Other trends are definitely starting to look good as more results come in, but probably too early to say anything definitive about the state Senate. But certainly signs are positive right there.
Cool. I wonder if this will be the first year I go to sleep before midnight, or if I'll just stay up. Obsessively refreshing, as we put it.
Well, Esther, should we let Maggie have the last word here?
Yes, Maggie. It would be great to hear from Maggie and their story.
All right, we have.
And,
introduce this.
Yeah, so I mentioned this way back 2 hours ago when we first started. The event that Maine Student Action and MPA put on with Planned Parenthood Votes and Next Gen, Rise Up 2020, the year of the youth vote, focusing on why we need to replace Senator Collins in the U.S. Senate. And Maggie shared their story with us. So I'll just let Mike press play and get that started.
Hey everybody, my name's Maggie. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a student at SMCC and a Maine Student Action Fellow. And I'd like to tell you the story about when I got diagnosed with diabetes when I was 16. It was confusing, it was disorienting, it was terrifying to have such a daunting condition that my doctors told me outright would never leave and might be one of the most challenging diseases to live with day to day. And for a while, it did feel like living someone else's life and like that couldn't be real. And that really only got worse when I saw the first medical bill of my life addressed to my name in the mail. And that feeling was so indescribable, but I'll try it for you today. I don't remember the 4-digit number on the bill, but I'm sure I've chosen to forget that, but I remember so clearly the pit in my stomach that formed and the tears that even welled up in my eyes when I realized that this was a burden that my single dad was going to have to bear by himself. And it broke my 16-year-old heart to hand him that piece of paper and confront the reality that my family was being punished for a disease that I had, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I was crushed, and it hurt my dad just as much to see me that way, and let alone deal with this impossible burden that he had been dealt. And I credit that moment to opening my eyes to the truth about how little support there is for everyday people who find themselves in situations like that. And I realized the leaders that I trusted to protect my life and my equal place in this world had failed me. And it wasn't long after that Susan Collins cast her vote to seal in Brett Kavanaugh, like we've all heard about, and that robbed me further of any kind of security I had in my healthcare. And before that, I thought I knew that no one could ever really suffer in this country if only they tried. But I've since seen that we as a working class of disabled people, chronically ill people, and their well-loved ones are all facing really impossible odds as a consequence of life-threatening illness. And our lives and our right to be free of financial burden are basically in the hands of our elected leaders right now. And I won't have the same experiences in life as a well person would as a result of these medical bills looming over my head, but I can consider myself really lucky, as I usually only have to spend under $100 on my medications every month. And that's a fraction of the cost that someone without insurance would pay, and an even smaller fraction of the cost for someone living with a more serious health condition than mine. And I'm sure many of us are thinking of ourselves or perhaps a loved one in a situation like this. And with every passing day that Susan Collins remains in office, our loved ones with chronic illnesses are continuing to just give away our money to pharmaceutical companies in exchange for our lives. Thank you.
All right. So I think a good reminder of what these races are about and the issues and the people behind them. I think with that we can probably say goodbye, and we will record a podcast tomorrow. Are we actually going to do that after spending all this time on video.
That's right. Stay in touch. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the podcast. Get on the Beacon News page, and we're no matter what happens tonight, the fight continues.
Mainbeacon.com. All right, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Good night.